Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching the stars pass by through the large viewing window. The ship had been traveling through deep space for 3 months now, looking for new planets and life forms. 200 humans worked on the ship, all excited about what they might find in the far reaches of space. "Captain, I'm getting some strange readings," said Lisa Grant, the chief science officer. She was staring at her computer screen with a worried look on her face. "There's something big out there, about 2 light years away." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the numbers on the screen. He had been exploring space for 15 years, but he had never seen energy readings like these before. The patterns were too organized, too purposeful to be natural. "What do you think it is?" Jake asked. "I think it's artificial, sir. Maybe a space station or a really big ship," Lisa replied. "The energy output is huge. Whatever made this has technology we've never seen before." First Officer Pete Collins came over to join them. He was a tall man with graying hair who had served with Jake for 8 years. "Should we investigate, Captain?" Jake thought for a moment. They were out here to explore and make contact with new civilizations. This could be their first real discovery. "Set course for those energy readings, but keep our weapons ready, just in case." The USS Liberty changed direction and began moving toward the unknown signals. As they got closer, Lisa's instruments showed more details. There were dozens of large ships surrounding a massive space station. The ships were unlike anything humans had ever built, with smooth curves and what looked like crystal parts glowing with blue light. "Captain, we're being scanned," reported Sue Parker from the navigation station. "Multiple ships are targeting us with some kind of energy beam." "Are they weapons?" Jake asked. "I don't think so. It feels more like they're looking at us, studying." "Our ship," Sue answered. Suddenly the main screen flickered and an image appeared. Jake and his crew saw their first alien being. The creature was tall and thin, with what looked like crystal growing from its skin. Its eyes were large and completely black. When it spoke, the ship's computer translated its words into English. "Unknown. Vessel. You have entered Zephyrian space without permission. I am High Commander Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire. State your purpose immediately." Jake stepped forward and activated the communication system. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human exploration ship USS Liberty. We come in peace, seeking to make contact with new civilizations. We didn't know this was your territory." The alien's expression didn't change, but there was something cold in its voice. "Humans. Another primitive species that thinks it can travel the stars. You will surrender your ship's technology data as payment for trespassing in our space." Pete moved closer to Jake and whispered, "Captain, we can't just give them our technology. Earth Command would never approve that." Jake nodded and spoke to the alien again. "High Commander, we would be happy to discuss trade agreements and diplomatic relations, but we cannot simply hand over our technology. Perhaps we could meet and talk about this properly." The alien's black eyes seemed to grow even darker. "You dare to refuse a direct order from the Zephyrian Empire? For 1,000 years, all species in this sector have bowed to our authority. You will learn respect." Without warning, the USS Liberty shook violently. Sparks flew from control panels across the bridge. The lights flickered and went out, leaving only emergency lighting. "They hit us with some kind of energy weapon," shouted Amy Rodriguez from the engineering station. "Main power is down. Life support is running on backup systems." Jake grabbed his captain's chair as the ship shook again. "Amy, how long until you can get main power back?" "I don't know, Captain. This isn't like any weapon I've seen before. It's not destroying our systems, it's just shutting them down," Amy replied, sweat running down her face as she worked frantically at her controls. On the main screen, High Commander Vexitar spoke again. "Your ship is now helpless. Prepare to be boarded. Your crew will come with us to our home world, where you will serve as an example to other species about the price of disrespecting the Zephyrian Empire." Jake felt his heart sink. He had led his crew into danger and now they were all trapped. But he wouldn't give up. "All hands. This is the captain. Prepare for boarding action. Hide anything important and stay together." Large alien ships moved, closer to the USS Liberty. Pete grabbed Jake's arm. Captain, what are we going to do? We survive, Pete. We find a way to get word back to Earth, and we survive. The hull of the USS Liberty groaned as alien ships attached to it. Soon they could hear the sound of cutting tools working through the metal. The Zephyrians were coming aboard. Amy worked desperately at her station, trying to bring systems back online. She managed to get partial power to some sections of the ship, but it wasn't enough to break free. Captain, they're inside the ship, reported Sue from her station. I can see them on the internal cameras. They're moving toward the crew quarters. Jake activated the ship's internal communication system. All crew members, this is Captain Morrison. Follow Emergency Protocol 7. Stay calm and stay together. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors outside the bridge. The alien soldiers were getting closer. Jake looked around at his bridge crew. These people had followed him across the galaxy, trusting him to keep them safe. Now they were all prisoners. The bridge doors burst open. 6 tall Zephyrian soldiers entered, their crystal skin glowing in the dim light. Behind them walked High, Commander Vextar himself. He looked around the bridge with obvious disgust. So this is human technology, he said. Primitive and crude, as expected. One of the soldiers grabbed Pete and forced him to his knees. Another took Lisa and pushed her against the wall. Jake started to move toward them, but a Zephyrian soldier pointed a weapon at his chest. You will all come with us, Vextar announced. Your ship will be taken apart and studied. Your crew will serve as slaves on our worlds, and your species will be marked for future attention. Jake looked the alien commander in the eyes. You're making a mistake. Humans don't give up easy, and we don't abandon our own. Vextar made a sound that might have been laughter. In 1,000 years, no species has ever challenged Zephyrian authority twice. You will learn, human. Your species will learn. As the Zephyrian soldiers led the bridge crew away, Jake managed to catch Amy's eye. She gave him a small nod. Somehow, she had managed to send a message before the aliens found her. Help would come, but Jake didn't know if it would come in time. News of the captured human ship spread quickly through the galaxy. On trading stations and diplomatic outposts, aliens from dozens of different species talked about what had happened to the USS Liberty. Most of them were not surprised. The Zephyrians had been capturing ships from newer space-traveling races for hundreds of years. Ambassador Tony Blake sat in his office on Nexus Prime, the largest neutral trading station in the galaxy. He had just received the terrible news from Earth. The USS Liberty and its crew of 200 humans were now prisoners of the Zephyrian Empire. Tony had been Earth's representative to the galactic community for 5 years, but he had never faced a crisis like this. His communication device buzzed. It was a message from Zelhan, the Altarian diplomat. The Altarians were one of the older space-traveling species, and they had been dealing with the Zephyrians for centuries. Ambassador Blake, I heard about your ship. I am sorry, but there is nothing that can be done. The Zephyrians control that entire sector of space, Zelhan's translated voice said through the speaker. Tony activated his reply system. There has to be something. We can't just leave our people as prisoners. I understand your feelings, but you must accept reality. The Zephyrians have the most powerful military in this part of the galaxy. No one challenges them and wins. Tony ended the call and stared out the window at the busy space station. Ships from 100 different worlds came and went, carrying goods and passengers across the stars. But none of them would help rescue human prisoners from the Zephyrians. Few hours later, Tony met with Counselor Thymos from the Centauri Republic in the station's diplomatic quarter. The Centauri were insect-like beings with 6 arms and large compound eyes. They had been dealing with the Zephyrians longer than almost any other species. Your people are brave to have refused Zephyrian demands, Thymos said, his voice clicking and buzzing even through the translator. But bravery will not save them now. What exactly will happen to them? Tony asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. The Zephyrians will take them to their home world. Some will be forced to work in their crystal mines. Others will be used as servants in their cities. A few might be kept as curiosities for their museums. Tony felt sick. And their ship? It will be taken apart piece by piece. The Zephyrians will study every part of it. Then they will use what they learn to make their own ships stronger. This is how they have stayed in power for so long. Has anyone ever tried to rescue prisoners from them? Thymos made a sound that the translator couldn't interpret. 300 years ago, the Rigel Confederacy tried to rescue some of their people. The Zephyrians destroyed their entire home fleet in response. Since then, no one has been foolish enough to try. Meanwhile, on the Zephyrian command ship Dominion's Edge, Captain Jake Morrison sat in a small metal cell. His hands were bound with energy chains that glowed with the same blue light as Zephyrian crystal technology. Through the small window, in his cell door, he could see other members of his crew in similar cells down the hallway. The ship was massive, much bigger than any human vessel. The corridors were lined with the same glowing crystals that seemed to power everything the Zephyrians built. Alien guards walked past his cell every few hours, their footsteps echoing on the metal floors. Dr. Carl Murphy from the medical bay was brought to a different part of the ship for questioning. The Zephyrians wanted to know about human biology, how humans could be controlled and what weaknesses they might have. Carl refused to answer any of their questions. "Your species is weak," the Zephyrian interrogator told him. "You have no natural armor, no claws, no poison. How did you ever survive long enough to reach the stars?" "We survived because we help each other," Carl replied. "Something your species wouldn't understand." The interrogator made notes on a crystal tablet. "This emotional attachment to other individuals is a weakness we will exploit. When your people see their friends suffering, they will be easier to control." In another part of the ship, Navigator Sue Parker was being questioned about human technology. The Zephyrians wanted to know how human ships worked and how they could be improved. Sue pretended to cooperate, giving them information that sounded helpful but was actually useless. While she talked, Sue was memorizing everything she could see: the layout of the ship, how many guards were in each section, where the weapons were stored, and how the Zephyrian technology worked. If there was ever a chance to escape, she wanted to be ready. Engineer Amy Rodriguez was being held in a cell near the ship's engine room. The Zephyrians had noticed her technical skills and wanted to use her knowledge to improve their own ships. But Amy had other plans. During her questioning, she managed to plant a small device near one of the computer terminals. It was a data recorder that she had hidden in her tool belt. If she could activate it remotely, it might be able to send information about their location back to Earth. High Commander Vextar walked through the prison section of his ship, looking at the human captives with satisfaction. These creatures would make excellent examples for the rest of the galaxy. When other species saw what happened to those who defied Zephyrian authority, they would be even more willing to submit. "Commander," one of his officers said, "we have intercepted a transmission from the human ship before we captured it. They sent a message to their home world." Vextar stopped walking. "What did the message say?" "It contained their location and a request for help. Should we be concerned?" Vextar made the sound that passed for laughter among his people. "Let them come. If the humans are foolish enough to send more ships, we will capture them too. It will save us the trouble of hunting them down later." "What should we do with the prisoners?" "Take them to Zephyr Prime. We will execute them publicly and broadcast the execution across the galaxy. Every species will see what happens to those who resist Zephyrian rule." Back on Nexus Prime, Ambassador Tony Blake received confirmation of his worst fears. Intelligence sources reported that the human prisoners were being taken to the Zephyrian homeworld for public execution. The broadcast would be sent to every major world in the galaxy as a warning. Tony immediately sent an urgent message to Earth. The Colonial Defense Force needed to know that their people were going to be killed unless someone acted quickly. But, even as he sent the message, Tony wondered what Earth could possibly do against the most powerful military force in this part of the galaxy. Other species watched and waited. Some felt sorry for the humans, but none were willing to risk Zephyrian anger to help them. The galaxy had learned long ago that it was safer to let the Zephyrians do whatever they wanted than to oppose them. But the Zephyrians had made one mistake. They assumed that humans would react like every other species they had conquered. They thought that fear would make Earth submit to their demands. They had no idea that humans had a very different response to threats against their own people. The message from Captain Morrison was already traveling through space toward Earth, carrying news of the capture and a desperate request for help. Soon the leaders of Earth would have to decide how to respond to this challenge. The Zephyrians expected submission and tribute. They were about to learn that humans had other ideas. The emergency meeting room in Earth's Colonial Defense Headquarters was filled with tension. President Helen Davis sat at the head of the large table, her face serious as she listened to the reports. Around the table sat the most important military and political leaders of Earth. Admiral Frank Carter, head of the Colonial Fleet, stood beside a large screen showing the star map of Zephyrian space. His uniform was covered with medals from 30 years of military service. Madam President, we have confirmed that the USS Liberty and all 200 crew members are being held prisoner by the Zephyrian Empire. What are their demands? Asked President Davis. They have no demands, replied Defense Secretary Rick Williams, reading from his tablet. According to our intelligence sources, they plan to execute Captain Morrison and his crew publicly. The execution will be broadcast across the galaxy as a warning to other species. Fleet Admiral Nancy Scott leaned forward in her chair. This is exactly what they did to the Rigel Confederacy 300 years ago. They captured their ships, killed their crews, and then destroyed any rescue attempts. Diplomatic Corps Director Paul Green cleared his throat. Madam President, we should try negotiation first. Starting a war with the most powerful military force in this sector could destroy any chance of Earth joining the galactic community peacefully. Admiral, Carter turned to face him. Paul, they've already made their choice. They captured our people and plan to kill them. This isn't about diplomacy anymore. But if we attack them, other species will see us as aggressive warmongers, Paul argued. We'll be alone in the galaxy with no allies. Fleet Commander Beth Morgan spoke up from her seat near the window. We already are alone. I've read the reports from Ambassador Blake. Not one species offered to help our people. They're all too afraid of the Zephyrians. President Davis had been listening quietly to the debate. She stood up and walked to the star map, studying the positions of Earth's fleet in the Zephyrian territory. Admiral Carter, what are our military capabilities compared to theirs? On paper, they have us outgunned, Carter admitted. Their individual ships are more powerful than ours, and they have more of them. But we have advantages they don't know about. Such as? They've been the dominant power for so long that they've become overconfident. They fight the same way they have for centuries. Our military doctrine is based on adapting to new situations and working together as coordinated units. General Dan White, head of the Colonial Marines, nodded in agreement. Their ground forces are used to fighting species that surrender quickly. They've never faced an enemy that refuses to give up. President Davis looked around the room at each person. These were the people responsible for protecting humanity's future among the stars. How long would it take to prepare our fleet? We can have 50 warships ready in 2 days, Admiral Carter replied. But Madam President, I need to be clear about what we're facing. This won't be easy. People will die. People are already going to die, President Davis said firmly. The question is whether we let it happen while we negotiate or we do something about it. Paul Green made one last attempt. There might be another way. We could offer them technology or resources in exchange for our people. That would just encourage them to capture more of our ships, Fleet Admiral Scott pointed out, and it would show every other species in the galaxy that humans can be bullied into submission. President Davis returned to her chair and looked directly at Admiral Carter. Frank, I'm authorizing the deployment of the Colonial Fleet. Bring our people home. Yes, Madam President. We'll need the UCS Defiant as flagship along with the UCS Vengeance and every available support vessel. What about stealth capabilities? Asked Commander Kate Lewis, who had been quietly listening from the back of the room. She was in charge of Earth's newest invisible ships. The UCS Shadow and her sister ships will be crucial, Admiral Carter replied. The Zephyrians won't expect an attack from ships they can't see. Over the next 2 days, the largest military fleet in human history prepared for departure. The massive dreadnought UCS Defiant was loaded with enough firepower to destroy entire planets. Captain Roy Johnson brought the UCS Vengeance online with its experimental weapon systems. Commander Kate Lewis prepared the stealth ships that could slip past enemy defenses undetected. 30,000 Colonial Marines led by General Dan White boarded transport ships. These soldiers had trained for years in zero-gravity combat and boarding actions. They were ready to fight in the corridors of alien ships if necessary. At the same time, across the galaxy, engineer Amy Rodriguez was still working on her secret plan aboard the Zephyrian ship. She had managed to plant several small devices throughout the vessel during her supervised work periods. The Zephyrians thought she was helping them understand human technology, but she was actually preparing to sabotage their systems. Amy had discovered that Zephyrian ships were all connected through a central computer network. If she could introduce the right kind of virus into one ship, it would spread to the entire fleet. She just needed the right moment to activate her hidden devices. Captain Morrison, still locked in his cell, had noticed the increased activity among the Zephyrian crew. Guards were more alert and officers seemed to be preparing for something important. Through whispered conversations with other prisoners during mealtimes, he learned that they were approaching the Zephyrian homeworld. Dr. Carl Murphy had continued to refuse cooperation during his interrogations. The Zephyrians were becoming frustrated with human stubbornness. They had expected the humans to break down and beg for mercy, but instead they remained defiant. Navigator Sue Parker had managed to create detailed mental maps of the entire ship. She knew where the weapons were stored, how to reach the communication systems, and which corridors had the fewest guards. If an opportunity for escape came, she would be ready. On the bridge of the UCS Defiant, Admiral Carter stood looking at the star charts. His fleet was ready to depart. 50 warships, 200 support vessels, and 30,000 Marines were prepared for the most dangerous mission in human history. "Admiral, all ships report ready for departure," reported his communications officer. Carter nodded and activated the fleet-wide communication system. "This is Admiral Carter to all ships. Today we go to bring our people home. The Zephyrians think they can capture and kill humans without consequences. They're about to learn that they made a serious mistake." He paused and looked around his bridge at the officers who would fight beside him. "We didn't start this fight, but we're going to finish it. All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump." The largest human fleet ever assembled disappeared into hyperspace, heading towards Zephyrian territory. Behind them, Earth waited anxiously for news. Ahead of them, the Zephyrian Empire prepared for what they expected to be an easy victory over another primitive species. Neither side knew that this battle would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The Zephyrians had ruled through fear and superior technology for 1,000 years, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity before. The rescue mission was beginning, and there would be no turning back. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyr system. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the UCS Defiant, looking at the massive display screen that showed 300 Zephyrian warships waiting for them. The enemy fleet was arranged in perfect formation around their home planet, confident and ready for what they thought would be an easy battle. "Admiral, we're being scanned by multiple enemy vessels," reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mills from the sensor station. "They're targeting all our ships with their weapon systems." "Let them look," Carter replied calmly. "Communications, open a channel to the Zephyrian flagship." The main screen flickered and showed High Commander Vextar on the bridge of his massive ship, the Eternal Dominion. The alien leader looked even more arrogant than before, his crystal skin glowing brighter with what seemed like excitement. "So the primitive humans have come to surrender," Vextar said, his translated voice filled with contempt. "You are wise, to bring tribute ships to beg for your people's lives." Admiral Carter stepped forward, his voice steady and cold. "This is Admiral Frank Carter of the Earth Colonial Fleet. I'm here to collect our people. Release them immediately or face the consequences. You have 1 hour to comply." Vextar made the harsh sound that passed for laughter among his species. "1 hour? You amuse me, human. Your tiny fleet against the might of the Zephyrian Empire? We have destroyed civilizations older and more advanced than yours. 59 minutes remaining," Carter replied and cut the communication. Across the human fleet, captains and crews prepared for battle. On the UCS Vengeance, Captain Roy Johnson checked his ship's experimental railgun systems. The weapons used magnetic fields to fire metal projectiles at incredible speeds, something the Zephyrians had never encountered before. Commander Kate Lewis aboard the UCS Shadow activated the stealth systems on her ship and 5 others like it. The vessels became invisible to Zephyrian sensors, moving silently toward the enemy rear positions. The Zephyrians had no idea that 6 deadly ships were approaching from behind. Meanwhile, on the Zephyrian prison ship, engineer Amy Rodriguez knew that the battle was about to begin. She had been pretending to help repair damaged systems while actually planting virus programs in the ship's computers. Now it was time to activate them. Amy pressed a hidden button on a device she had built from spare parts. Across the Zephyrian fleet, computer systems began to malfunction. Shield generators flickered on and off. Weapon targeting systems gave false readings. Communication networks started breaking down. "What's happening to our systems?" shouted a Zephyrian technician on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. "The human prisoner must have sabotaged our computers," Vextar replied angrily. "Kill her immediately." But Amy had planned for this. She had activated a security lockdown that sealed the engineering sections where she was working. The Zephyrian guards couldn't reach her, and she continued to send more virus programs through their network. On the UCS Defiant, Admiral Carter saw the enemy fleet beginning to experience problems. "All ships, this is Carter. The enemy is having technical difficulties. Attack now, all units advance." The human fleet moved forward in coordinated groups, something the Zephyrians had never seen before. Instead of charging straight ahead like most species did, the humans split into multiple attack formations that hit the enemy from different angles at the same time. Captain Johnson led the UCS Vengeance and 12 other ships in a flanking attack against the left side of the Zephyrian formation. Their railguns opened fire, sending metal projectiles through space at tremendous speed. The Zephyrians' energy shields, designed to stop laser weapons, were not effective against solid projectiles. 3 Zephyrian ships exploded in the first attack as the railgun projectiles tore through their hulls. The enemy had never faced weapons like these before and didn't know how to defend against them. Commander Lewis and her stealth ships struck from behind, targeting the Zephyrian command vessels with torpedo attacks. The invisible ships appeared suddenly, fired their weapons, and disappeared again before the enemy could respond. "Our rear guard is under attack by ships we cannot see," reported a panicked Zephyrian officer to Vextar. "Impossible," Vextar replied. "No species has stealth technology that advanced." But the evidence was right in front of him. 4 of his command ships were already burning wrecks, and his fleet was confused and disorganized. The virus programs that Amy had planted were making things worse. Ships were losing power, weapons were misfiring, and communication was breaking down. Admiral Carter pressed his advantage. "General White, launch all Marine boarding parties. Target the prison ships first." 30,000 Colonial Marines launched from their transport ships and small fast attack craft. They had trained for years in zero-gravity combat and ship-to-ship boarding actions. The Zephyrians had never faced an enemy that actually tried to capture their ships instead of just destroying them. The Marines used cutting tools and explosives to break through the hulls of Zephyrian vessels. Once inside, they fought their way through the corridors using tactics the aliens had never encountered. Instead of fighting individually like most species, the humans worked in coordinated teams that supported each other. General White led the assault on the prison ship where Captain Morrison and his crew were being held. The Zephyrian guards were skilled fighters, but they were not prepared for the intensity and teamwork of human soldiers. "Sector 7 secured," White reported over his radio. "Moving toward the prisoner holding area." On the Eternal Dominion, Vextar watched his perfect fleet falling apart. Ships were exploding, systems were failing, and the humans were boarding his vessels. This was not how battles were supposed to go. For 1,000 years, the Zephyrians had won through superior technology and overwhelming force. But the humans were fighting differently. "Commander, the prison ship is being boarded," reported his tactical officer. "Our guards are requesting reinforcements." "Send everything we have," Vextar ordered. "We cannot let the humans rescue their people." "But," It was too late. General White and his Marines had fought their way to the prison section. They found Captain Morrison and his crew locked in metal cells, but alive and ready to fight. "Captain Morrison, this is General White, Colonial Marines. We're here to take you home." Jake Morrison smiled for the first time in weeks. "It's good to see you, General. What's our situation?" "We're winning, sir, but we need to get you and your people out of here before the Zephyrians regroup." As the Marines freed the prisoners, Amy Rodriguez managed to reach the ship's main computer, Core. She uploaded one final virus program that would spread to every Zephyrian ship in the fleet. Within minutes, enemy vessels began losing power completely. The tide of battle had turned completely. The Zephyrian fleet, once the most feared military force in the galaxy, was scattered and broken. Their perfect formations were gone, their communication was down, and their ships were being captured or destroyed by an enemy they had underestimated. Admiral Carter opened communications to the remaining Zephyrian ships. "This is Admiral Carter. To all Zephyrian vessels. Surrender now and you will be treated according to the laws of war. Continue fighting and face complete destruction." High Commander Vextar, his flagship damaged and his fleet in ruins, finally understood that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans didn't fight like any species he had ever encountered. They were adaptable, creative, and absolutely refused to give up. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire had been defeated. 3 days after the Battle of Zephyr Prime, the galaxy was a different place. News of the Zephyrian defeat spread faster than hyperspace travel could carry it. On hundreds of worlds, species that had lived in fear for centuries finally dared to hope for freedom. Admiral Carter stood on the observation deck of the UCS Defiant, looking down at the planet Zephyr Prime. The once mighty Zephyrian homeworld was now under human protection. His fleet maintained orbit while diplomatic teams worked on the surface to establish a new government. Captain Morrison, now promoted to admiral for his courage during captivity, joined Carter at the window. His uniform was new, replacing the torn clothes he had worn as a prisoner. "Hard to believe it's over," Jake said. "It's not over," Carter replied. "This is just the beginning. We've changed everything, Jake. The old order is gone." Below them on the planet, a remarkable transformation was taking place. The military caste that had ruled the Zephyrian Empire for 1,000 years had been removed from power. In their place, a civilian government led by former dissidents was taking control. Prime Minister Kethra, who had spent years in prison for opposing the old regime's aggressive policies, now stood in the former military headquarters. She was one of the few Zephyrians who had argued for peaceful relations with other species instead of conquest. "We must rebuild our society," Kethra announced to her new cabinet. "For too long we have been feared throughout the galaxy. Now we must learn to be respected instead." Her first official act was to sign a peace treaty with Earth and release all prisoners held in Zephyrian territory. Hundreds of beings from dozens of different species were freed from labor camps and prisons across the Empire. On Nexus Prime Trading Station, Ambassador Tony Blake found himself at the center of a diplomatic revolution. His office was constantly filled with representatives from species that wanted to establish relations with Earth. The victory over the Zephyrians had proven that humans were a major power in the galaxy. "Ambassador Blake," said Councillor Thymos, from the Centauri Republic, "my government wishes to propose a mutual defense treaty with Earth. We have much to offer each other." Similar offers came from the Altarian Empire, the Andromedan Collective, and dozens of smaller civilizations. Everyone wanted to be allied with the species that had defeated the mighty Zephyrian Empire. But Tony was careful in his responses. "We appreciate your interest in friendship with Earth," he told each delegation. "However, we want partners, not subjects. Any alliance must be based on equality and mutual respect." Meanwhile, engineer Amy Rodriguez had become a hero throughout human space. Her sabotage of the Zephyrian computer systems had been crucial to the victory. She received the Colonial Medal of Honor in a ceremony broadcast across Earth and all human colonies. Amy Rodriguez represents the best of humanity, President Helen Davis said during the medal ceremony. When faced with seemingly impossible odds, she found a way to fight back. Her courage saved not just her crewmates but changed the course of galactic history. Amy stood at attention as the medal was placed around her neck, but her mind was already working on new problems. Earth's sudden rise to galactic prominence had created new challenges that would require technological solutions. The effects of the battle reached far beyond diplomacy. On worlds throughout the galaxy, oppressed species began to assert their independence. The Rigel Confederacy, which had been crushed by the Zephyrians 3 centuries earlier, declared the restoration of their government. The Vegan Trade Union announced that they would no longer pay tribute to Zephyrian administrators. The crystal miners of Proxima demanded fair wages instead of working as slaves. Everywhere, the old system of fear and submission was breaking down. Not everyone was happy with these changes. Some species had prospered under Zephyrian protection and were worried about the new uncertainty. The hegemony of Tau Ceti sent a formal protest to Earth, claiming that the humans had disrupted the natural order of the galaxy. Admiral Carter addressed these concerns during a broadcast to all major civilizations. Earth did not seek to become a galactic power, he said. We only wanted to rescue our people. But when we were forced to choose between submission and strength, humanity chose to stand. He continued, we offer friendship to all peaceful species, protection to those who need it, and a firm warning to any who would prey upon the innocent. The galaxy has seen what happens when humans are provoked. Let this be the last time such a demonstration is necessary. The broadcast was heard on thousands of worlds and translated into hundreds of languages. Its message was clear. Humanity would not be the aggressor, but neither would it allow others to be victimized. In the months that followed, Earth established its first interstellar military academy on a moon orbiting Zephyr Prime. Officers from dozens of species came to study human military tactics and leadership principles. The academy's motto was simple: never leave anyone behind. Captain Morrison, now in charge of the academy, watched as cadets from former enemy species trained alongside humans. Zephyrian officers worked with Altarian tacticians, while Centauri engineers collaborated with human designers. This is what we were fighting for, Morrison told his staff. Not conquest, but the chance for everyone to live without fear. The Galactic Trade Alliance underwent massive reorganization. The new charter, largely written by human diplomats, established principles of mutual respect, free trade, and collective defense. No single species would ever again be allowed to dominate others through military force. As the first anniversary of the Battle of Zephyr Prime approached, President Davis addressed the United Nations on Earth. A year ago, our people were captured and threatened with execution. Today, they are leaders in a new galactic community built on cooperation instead of fear. She looked out at the assembled delegates, many of whom were now aliens from worlds across the galaxy. We did not seek to become warriors among the stars. We wanted only to explore, to learn, and to grow. But when forced to defend our own, humanity showed the galaxy who we truly are. The speech ended with words that would be remembered for generations. We are not conquerors. We are not oppressors. But we are not victims either. The galaxy now knows. Humans are not a species to be provoked. Far out in the depths of space, automated monitoring stations detected strange energy signatures moving in the void between galaxies. Ancient things, older than any current civilization, had been awakened by the massive energy discharges of the recent battle. But those were challenges for the future. For now, the galaxy was at peace, protected by the knowledge that somewhere among the stars, humanity stood ready to defend those who could not defend themselves. The age of Zephyrian dominance was over. The age of galactic cooperation had begun.